Hi there, Anna here. Today we paint a landscape like this. I painted the landscape on a wood slice. I bought last week some of them and I noticed that they are really messy. Loose bark is falling apart and it's crumpy and dirty, and I think it's good to prepare the whole layer with the bark with gesso. For this I bought some Liquitex gesso, it's a clear gesso. When I apply it, it will be a bit milky, but it dries completely transparent. And I covered the whole slice on this side, and because I will hang this slice on a tree or in a doorway or something, I will paint the backside with a similar painting. And at first I will cover this backside also completely with this Liquitex clear gesso. Let's get started. I forgot to mention that the surface of the wood is quite soaky, and because I will paint it with gouache, the water will soak in there, so it's better to have a thin protection layer. I will apply the protection layer with a painting knife. Just open the bottle and put some white transparent gesso on this. I have a paper tissue to wipe my painting knife. And you can go over the edge completely. I don't know if the crumbling of the bark will stop with this, but I hope so. On this piece there is no loose bark at the moment. So we covered the whole disc, and I want a smooth layer, and for this I spreading this out with an old brush. I have here an old school brush, not really fancy, nothing that I use for painting, and I just lightly go over it and spread it out a bit. I have no pressure on it, just the weight of the brush. No pressure. And I take another painting knife and smoothly go over it to even it a bit more. Better with the small one. So now it's completely covered. I will let it dry completely, and then I will apply another layer, and then I think it should be ready for painting it. So stay tuned and we will start with the painting. It is the next day. I let the first layer dry completely, and then I applied a second layer, but I applied it too thick, so you can see it's a bit milky. This is an unprimed disc, and you see that the bark is really light, and even with one coat it's a bit lighter than this bark. But it doesn't matter in my case. I just mentioned that the next time I will apply one layer or two thin layers. The next step that I have done is that I marked the end of the horizon. I go with the finger here and set a mark, and the same on the other side here. And when I lay down the disc, then I see that this horizon point is a bit lower than this, and when I flip, I can lay it so that this is a bit lower than this, and now I can paint the landscape, and later when it hangs on a tree and there is a hole in it, then both landscapes are leveled and not one on the head upside down and the one on the right. So I will sketch the mountains. I will also do 3 tips like here. It must not be the same. Maybe I sketch a 4th. And that's it, the complete sketch that I need to paint. And I grab now my gouache paints, and then we start to paint the sky. I'm back and I have added on my palette some primary cyan, some ultramarine blue, titanium white and Madder Lake Deep. These smaller tubes are artist quality, and these bigger tubes are student quality paints. I will use a bristle brush to lay out the paint. I also will use later a filbert brush. I have here 2 sizes, in the 2 and the 4, and the bristle brush is size 8. And let's get started. We need some water, and in the outer edge I want to add a bit darker, and for this I mixed it's a bit too wet. I mixed the ultramarine with a bit of the red tone. Be careful not to use too much water like I do. You see that the water flows like watercolor paper. Just applying paint roughly. And I noticed that I have to add 2 less blue. I add a bit more. I use a bit of white. And I paint the second layer. With a bristle brush you can really have a good scrub. And the wood and the gesso was really rough. I'm a bit afraid that I will destroy my finer brushes. to the horizon, to the mountains, the sky will be lighter. But before we add more white, I will paint the dark base layer. Sometimes I add a drop of water on my palette with the end of my brush, so I have a better control with the wetness. There is no need to dip the brush into the water. If I dip the brush, then it's too wet, like in the beginning. So we laid out the base layer. It's more violet in real than you will see it in the camera. And gouache can be reactivated with water and with moist paint. So I add a drop of water, a bit of white, and I mix the white into it and start to lighten up the areas. And as you can see, it reactivates the darker layer underneath, and we can create smooth blendings. And it's better to lay the disc in an angle where you can easily paint on. There's no need to paint only in one position. The white is student grade white. It's titanium white, but it's not that opaque like the artist quality white. I really like how the white blends into the dark base layer. We can add a bit of the other blue to get some variations. It's quite hard to see if it's wet. Maybe I lay down a bit of my pencil case. I add a bit of cyan. And always a water drop to blend in. If I want to blend the paints without spreading out the lighter tone too much, I cleaned my brush just with dipping it on the paper. Then the brush dries a bit and I can really smoothly blend. And if it's too light, you can go with a pure blue or mix in some of the red. Work back and forth until you really like this. My brush is really dry now, and I will create some lighter spots in the sky. Just as you can see, the galaxy or the Milky Way or something like this. I clean my brush a bit. I dip them in water and wipe them on a paper towel so it's a bit cleaner. And I just dab to smoothen it out and make it look more naturally. and in between we can add some dark spots. I think it's too bright to the edge, and I will clean my brush that all the white is out of my bristles. And with the ultramarine blue and the reddish tone, I create a dark violet. I don't use black for the sky. The sky is never pure black. And dabbing it into the painting. Maybe it's a bit too red. I add more blue. Just relax the process. Have fun with it. I smoothen the paint a bit out. There, I don't want rough marks. And I'm now really happy. Maybe this is a bit too dark. A tiny hint of white. So, I think the sky is completed. Before we add some hills, some mountains, I want to spritz some stars on it. I clean my brush that all the red and blues are out, and I take a good chunk of water. A bit reddish is in there. I mixed in some white. And I spritz it like this. You can use a toothbrush too. I think this is great. Why do I spritz in this state? Because when I will paint the mountains and I start to spritz, then all the dots will go over the mountains and I can't protect them without using a tape or something. On the other side from this disc, I painted the stars manually, and it looks not so naturally like this version. I really like this when it's a bit irregular. And even if the dots will dry too dark, because it's not the artist quality white, I can go over it with a brush on some stars, and I can use those dots as a guide for brighten the stars later. So I paint at first these white mountain edges. I use my filbert brush. He's damp, and I go into the student white and will sketch in where I want the edges of the mountains. And when I have done the sketches, I paint the first layer of pure white. It's not really pure white because there are some pigments in, but it doesn't matter. I will go over it later with the second layer of white and using some artist white quality, which is more brighter and more opaque. If you paint with the soft brushes on this rough surface, don't wiggle in one and the other direction. This will destroy the hairs. Just move them in one direction and not against the direction of the brushes. So now the sides where the light is coming from are painted with the base layer. Maybe I add a little bit. And the second step on the mountains will be that I paint all the shadow areas, and for this I will use the ultramarine blue and the cyan. I need quite a bit of ultramarine for this. And it doesn't matter if some red goes into it too. The first layer is really watery. Be careful with this, but to just cover the areas, it's good to use a thin layer. I normally work with gouache from thin to thick. Sometimes I use more ultramarine blue, sometimes I use more cyan, and sometimes I add some of the reddish tone. And maybe we can lighten the blue a bit. We have to go over the areas again because we want to create some texture. Just blocking in the colors. On the bottom of the mountains, it's not so important to cover it completely opaque because we will paint the trees later and they will cover the area. I will look at the other side, and we see that I have really dark areas here and that you can see some kind of structure, and I will try to paint this on this side too. We of course have structured for my brush strokes, and because it's not complete opaque, because I used a lot of water, but I will add some more texture so that it looks more naturally. Especially here, a bit lighter blue, where the bright snow goes into the shadows. I will add some dark areas. I have no real plan to paint this. I just add here and there strokes to look at to make it a bit more interesting. So I think this looks really nice. Maybe a few lighter spots. I think it looks way more interesting than these rocks. They are too even. And if I want to blend some edges, I wipe off the extra paint, and just with a damp brush without any paint, I go over the edges and they blend with the layer underneath together. Here the same, just carefully circling motions. I will add now the artist quality white to make the mountains, the snow, a bit brighter. We don't need much. And I go into the white and lighten some areas, but not completely, because the underground white, it works as a shadow. So I'm back. I have to stop the video for a moment. I'm really happy with it, and I will smoothen the edges where the snow goes into the shadows a bit. Now I think it's time to lighten up some stars. I clean my brush and choose a smaller brush. This is a size 0 brush from Da Vinci, and the tip is really steady. It's a really fine point, and I go into the artist white and brighten up some of the bigger stars. Now I will grab my black. It's deep black, and I will mix it a bit into all my leftover paints. For the mixing I use my good old Dalaroni size 2 brush. I use them in so many videos. I mix some other colors into the black to get a more natural black, not a complete deep black. My trees, I start with painting a vertical stroke. There's no need to paint a complete even stroke. Trees are not always exactly vertical. This is the base of my trees, and I changed the brush to the filbert brush. I use the smaller ones, the size 2. Go into the dark paint and just lightly dabbing to the left and to the right side. And because it's a filbert brush, you get a kind of round angle. And you create some texture. And if you need to add some more trees, you can paint with the side of the filbert brush, and you get also a fine line. And at the bottom of the trees there's a complete coverage of paint. I just dab. This filbert brush makes such rounded dabs. It's really cool. Maybe some of the trees can be a bit bigger. And I think the painting is finished. I will add some bluish shadows in the snow because I think there is too even white. Some blue. If you want to paint a snowy landscape by night, then watch out this video. And thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.